Math 2, Unit 3, Worksheet 3C. I'm going to go through the odds right now, help you out completing this worksheet. An angle bisector cuts an angle in half and creates two congruent angles. A segment bisector cuts a segment in half and creates two congruent segments. Given, line segment AD bisects line segment CB. Angle A is congruent to angle D. All right, so let's get that written in there. We have line segment AD bisects line segment CB, and we have angle A is congruent to angle D, and that's given information. All right, now let's take our given information and put it up here on our picture. So AD bisects or cuts BC in half or CB in half, which means we know these two line segments are congruent. Don't know anything about AD. It just says that AD cuts CB in half. Okay, we also know that angle A is congruent to angle D. All right, that's the given information. And we also, it gives us two of the three pieces we have to list here. One, it's already stated. We have to state now CE is congruent to EB, and then we have to do our investigative work. So let's do that first. Let's put line segment CE. Oh, no, we can't do that because we've got a part filled in for us already. So I guess that's a giveaway. We know that vertical angles are congruent. So we're going to say that angle AEC is congruent to, we got to be careful here. Notice one line, two lines, no lines. One line, two lines, no lines. So DEB, angle DEB. And that's because of vertical angles. We can't use just one letter here because there's four angles here with E as a vertex. So we have to be very clear. AEC is congruent to DEB. If you don't put it that way, it's wrong. Okay, now we can say that line segment CE is congruent to line segment EB, definition of segment bisector. So the only thing you have to be careful of when we give you the statements or the reasons, make sure you get them in the right spot, match up with what's given to. And CE is congruent to EB. Okay, now you'll notice we have by angle, angle, side, angle, angle, side, we have proven the two triangles together. Here is one angle, check. Here is our second angle, check. And there's our side, check. So now we can say that triangle CEA is congruent to triangle. Okay, we got to be careful now. We went CEA, so it has to be BED. And we know that's by angle, angle, side. And we've just put that to bed. All right, moving on to number 3. All right, let's see. Given DC bisects angle BCA. Angle BDA is congruent to angle ADC. All right, let's write this down. Didn't give us much room here. DC is congruent, or excuse me, bisects when am I going to have to run out of room here? Angle BCA, and we know that angle BDC is congruent to angle ADC. Didn't give us a lot of room, and that is given. All right, now let's look at what we have. DC bisects angle BCA. If it bisects it, it cuts it into two congruent angles. Okay? And we know that angle BDC is congruent to angle ADC. So we know these two guys are congruent, which means they have to be right angles. So It's not necessarily important in this one that it is a right angle, but we know that if two lines intersect and they're both congruent, then they have to be 90 degrees because they would have to be supplementary. And we also know that they share this side, right? So hopefully you can see by angle, side, angle, side, angle, we're going to prove these two guys congruent. I know you might be thinking, hey, it's a right triangle. We don't have to use hypotenuse leg with a right triangle. Okay, so let's see what we got here. We know that angle BCA, we know that angle BDC is congruent to angle ADC. So that's one of our angles. We got that covered. Okay, now we need to, let's get this DC bisector used. So let's say angle BCD is congruent to angle ACD. And that is because of this information here. Definition of angle, we'll use the symbol angle bisector. Okay, so now we've got the two angles down. We got the one they gave us, and we got the one that was from the angle bisector. Now we have to show that DC, line segment DC, is congruent to line segment DC, and that is reflexive property. Reflexive property. And now that we have our angle, and we'll even come down here to side angle, we can say that triangle BDC is congruent to, now let's look, BDC is congruent to ADC. Triangle ADC. How do we know? By angle, side, angle postulate. Okay, let's go on to number 5. All right, given that E is the midpoint of AD and BC. All right, well, that's a little easier to write down. Given E is the midpoint of AD, line segment AD, and line segment CB. Okay, that's given. All right, so let's go ahead and see what that tells us. We know that E is the midpoint of AD, so we know these two guys are going to be congruent, and CB, so we know these two guys are going to be congruent. All right, so we have 2 of our 3 things. What else do we know? Yep, you're right. Vertical angles are congruent. So now we just have to write all this down. So we're going to write, and we can actually do the first 2. We're going to be side, angle, side, right? And we can cover the sides in really one statement. We can say that AE is congruent to ED. And we can also say that, let's see if I can fit it on the same line, we know that CE, line segment CE, is congruent to line segment EB. Because it's the same reason, it's from the given definition of midpoint. The fact that they told us that E is the midpoint of AD and CB gives us the 2 sides. AE is congruent to ED and CE is congruent to EB. AE is congruent to ED and CE is congruent to EB. Because E is the midpoint of both those line segments. So now we just need to say that angle AEC is congruent. We have to be careful here. AEC, so we have to go DEB. Angle DEB, it's very important, and that's vertical angles are congruent. Okay? All right. So now that we've proven side angle side, we can say that triangle ACE is congruent to...
Just a sec. I didn't get that.
Sorry, Siri wanted to help out. ACE. So let's see, ACE. So we're going to go ACE. So we're going to go DBE. This is what I always do. I go ACE. So no lines, two lines, one line. So no lines, two lines, one line. What I mean is there's no congruency lines here, two congruency lines there, and one congruency line there. And we know that because of side angle side postulate. Okay, and that is the odds for worksheet C.